hold on, who am I? Where am I at in my life? And what's important to me? We quite often think, I need to be this or this, but I can be these things over different times.
I'm excited to have this conversation. And I got to tell you, the first thing I'm most excited to find out is what the heck is an accidental business leader? Because I'm trying to figure out how you do that on accident. So tell me, let's start there if you could. Give me a brief understanding of what an accidental business leader actually is, because I'm trying to figure out if I am one, and I'm curious to know.
First of all, an accidental business owner is somebody that is so good at their craft that they have accidentally ended up in business. So what I would say is that they never set out when they were a kid or in their 20s to go, I should have a business. They just honed in on their craft and they became good at it, that they ended up going, well, it's obvious that I should end up in business. It's obvious that I should have a business of my own. But they have never been around the language of business or business people. And the same with leaders. Quite often we get people that are amazing at their craft, lawyers, doctors, that are so good at what they do, they end up in leadership roles. And so for those of us that are entirely different to that, like I literally at the age of 13 knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And I was having conversations with my father about business from the age of 8 or 9.
Hmm. It's interesting because I actually had a conversation right before this with someone who said, hey, if you can give a 16-year-old who's interested in entrepreneurship advice on how to become an entrepreneur, what would it be? And my answer was not try and be an entrepreneur, but just go out and experience life and just do stuff. Go travel, go meet people, go talk to people, just go work some different jobs, see what it is that you like and what you don't like. And if you happen upon something that just clicks and you decide to pursue that, then go chase that. So it's interesting because I didn't realize I was actually advising them to become an accidental business leader. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's great advice, honestly.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that I think that the worst thing we've done with entrepreneurship is actually label it, make it cool, and literally tell people that they can get a degree in it. Because, in my humble opinion, a true entrepreneur is literally, it's in them. And I'm not
Yeah.
one. Like, I'm a business owner. I've owned businesses and I've loved business all my life, but I'm not an entrepreneur. I am not one of those people that will take massive risks and see opportunities where others can't. I'm the person that once you've got the idea, I'll work alongside you. And once I've got it, I'm like, I get it now. I get the ecosystem. I get how this is going to work. And so it's that bit that quite often people that are accidental business owners have not thought about. So they haven't thought
Right.
about, how it all fits together, how it's like a little ecosystem in itself.
Yeah, it's very true, and I think there's also a big component about not caring about the mess and getting punched in the face a couple times a day, because there are a lot of people who have really good ideas who could really benefit the world, but who don't pursue them and execute those ideas because they are afraid of what actually happens when you start a business and all the things that go alongside of it. It's messy, it's a struggle. So for them, they see this glorified definition of entrepreneurship. They say, hey, let me start a business because I want to share this idea. And then they get smacked down on day one and their idea dies.
Yep.
Right. Whereas they may be better suited to take their idea and hand it to someone to let them run with it, where they can operate in their gifting, let the true entrepreneur do what they do. And then that's the route they could take. Right. So would that sort of be your advice there?
Yeah, I think the thing is that in anything in life, we all have really amazing strengths. And what we quite often do in this time in history is that we want to label things, like we're quite extreme in things. Like we want to label things as good or bad, and it's good to be an entrepreneur. Well, it is amazing to be an entrepreneur if that's inside you. It is hell on earth if it is not what you want, if it's not the way your brain works and the way things, so I think living outside our truth at any stage is just like the worst thing to do. But if you have that risk factor, that risk profile, and yeah, like you go for it. But as you say, sometimes people have a million and one ideas, but they have no ability to get it to that management phase. So they can do the startup, but they can never do the management phase, and then, there's so many different stages and phases of a business that people are good at and other people are just terrible at. So to answer your question, I think I love the idea that we all have our strengths, and whatever our strength is also our greatest weakness.
Hmm.
So,
So
sorry.
yeah, no, God, I was just going to say that I think an important part of that is the understanding that one is not better than the other, right? Because I think a lot of people, like you said, they want to put a label on it, and if you are not an entrepreneur, doesn't make you bad, right? Just because that's not your gifting, you don't have that set of skills, doesn't make you bad, right? It's the example or the analogy that I would often take is if you have a Ferrari and you have a pickup truck in your garage and you want to go pick up a bunch of dirt or some mulch to do some yard work, which one are
I'm
you
not
going to take?
taking the Ferrari. I'm
Right.
not.
Doesn't
It's
mean the
not going to
Ferrari is
happen.
a bad car, but
Yep.
that's not the use case for it. So you want to really use things in what they're designed for. And we, as humans, are the same way. We have a unique gifting. So why are we trying to operate outside of it and getting frustrated when it doesn't work?
Ah, yes. Absolutely. I could not agree more. And we are so evangelistic in at this time in history. We're all whether it comes down to diet or it comes down to religion or it comes down to political views, we're in these extremes. We're actually, most of us live in this place in the middle. I live in extremes in certain things, but not probably in my viewpoint of things. I eat a very, very specific way, not because I think everyone else should. It's just the thing that works for my body. Everyone else should
Right.
mind their own business in what I eat. They can go eat whatever they need to eat. But we evangelistically go, well, if I'm going to eat keto, then the whole, everyone needs to, and everyone's a bit of a, knob if they don't, and it's like, oh my goodness, we've got different bodies, we embrace those differences.
Hmm. Do you think it comes from a sense of wanting to belong? Because I think as humans, we want to belong to some level of tribe. So we feel like, hey, if I'm doing this thing and you're doing this thing, we have it in common. We can share experiences. So I almost want you to do it just so I could have you as part of my tribe. But instead, what if we just start looking at, hey, what are the unique giftings that we both have that we share in common and form tribe that way rather
But
than forcing some commonality?
go back to the tribe situation. Is everyone in the tribe the same?
No, they shouldn't be.
Never. It,
Right.
that that's exactly right. You do not want a whole bunch of hunters if you've got no gatherers. That's not how
Right.
that works. And so the collaboration is, I think, the bit that for some reason we seem to be thinking that same is belonging. Where I
Mm,
think belonging to a tribe is actually embracing the differences and working
mm,
together and appreciating. You don't have, everyone's not the medicine man in the tribe.
right.
You might have one or two, it's not, we don't, God, we're really diving down deep here. It's the same for me. It's the same with gender, with being a woman. It's like I don't need to be the same as any man I know. I have my own unique things that I can do as a woman, and I'm really happy about that.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that too is really understanding who we are authentically, right?
Mm.
Because that when you look around, you see a lot of people who really want to try and fit a mold because they see, hey, John Smith is having success doing this. So let me try and be John Smith and do that because then maybe I will be successful too. Right? But they are totally dismissing who they are because they don't actually know who they are.
So I think this comes back to Tony Robbins introducing modeling in a big way. You just reverse engineer everything. And there's only one problem with reverse engineering, exactly like you said. Did we stop and go, actually, who am I? If we just go, oh look, I want this, I need to reverse engineer it. We also have to go, well, hold on, who am I? Where am I at in my life? And what's important to me? Because I think again, we quite often think, I need to be this or this, but I can be these things over different times. I
Right.
took a big time out and took a big step back in my career while my son was growing up. best thing I ever did. You'll never convince me that it was the wrong thing. And then I worked super, super hard to kind of feel like I caught back up again. Again, you can't convince me it was the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a big part of why so many people find themselves unhappy is we are grading ourselves against someone else's test result score,
Yeah.
rather than looking at our own and saying, hey, am I the most authentic version of me? I'm trying to be an authentic version of somebody else, which is literally impossible. And we wonder why we're frustrated.
And, and like, if we go back to that, like for me, it was around motherhood. It was like, oh, I'm not being this career woman that is inside of me. But then I had to take into consideration that that wasn't that important at that time because I was an older mother. So I'd already done a lot of things to put me in a financial position that allowed me to do that. And so, again, we're comparing ourselves to people that might be 10 years younger than us. They're not in the same financial position. And it's like, again, hold on. Who am I authentically, and at the stage, age, and phase in my life?
Right. So how do you get out of the habit of comparing yourself to other people? Is the first step really understanding who you are and truly loving yourself? Like, where would you start trying to break the habit of comparison in that?
Mind your own business.
Go on.
My
Like, what
advice to the
do you
world
mean
be
by that?
everyone just mind their own business. Like everyone is just sticking their nose in everyone else's business. Mind your own business. And exactly like you said, just start with yourself. I would say start taking radical responsibility for
Mm,
yourself, for the situation that you've ended up. It might not be your fault. I understand that. I've ended up in a number of situations that I could say arguably aren't my fault. However, they are my responsibility. And that's our ability to respond is so important.
mm. A couple of things there. One is I love the concept, and I agree fully, of the difference between fault and responsibility, right? So it might not be your fault, but it can still very much be your responsibility. And your external conditions do not change your responsibility, right? So just if something else changes, doesn't mean you're suddenly not responsible for the thing you said you were going to go do. So please go do that. But point two there, I don't mean to cut you off, is um, it's really difficult to figure out who you are for some people, right? Because we've spent so much time living this charade of what the world tells us we are or what society defines success as. It could be really uncomfortable to say, hey, I am 40 years old and I have no clue who I am. I'm afraid to start over and figure out for the first time who I am. So I'm just going to stay stuck in this bubble because even though it's uncomfortable, it's more comfortable than the discomfort of trying to start over. Right? Do you
And that
see
is
that
just a
as a habit?
mindset. That is
Right.
just a mindset. If someone said that to me, I'd say, okay, so this is where we are. Tell me where this is going to lead, and then tell me where this is going to lead. Now pick. Because all of life is about short term pain, long term pleasure, or
Mm,
short term pleasure, long term pain. There's nothing in life that we don't have to weigh up. That's just taking responsibility.
yeah.
Given that this is where I'm at, what's my next best move? For that person, my next best move is okay, yes, someone might say they don't know who they are. Let's just start with what they don't know then, or, like, who aren't you? Let's start there. I've figured out so many things in my life based on what I do not want to do. There's only a few things left on what I do want to do. It's like, okay, well, that's shortened the list. Let's go with that.
Right.
Again, though, super interesting in this day, at this time in history, that I would argue we have too many choices and it literally paralyzes people to do nothing.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I think part of the problem too for a lot of people is they don't consider how simple it can be to just take a step,
Yes. Yeah,
right? You don't have to have the whole thing figured out.
that's exact. And it's like, so if someone's sitting there going, I don't know who I am, and and they're not doing anything, they're not taking any steps. There's a couple of really, really simple solutions to that. Go hang out at a hospital where everyone's dying. Just go hang out there. Go hang out at a gravesite. Just go and hang out and realize one day you're going to be dead. It's as simple as that. We are acting like we are never going to die, And so we live like that. We live like we're never going to die. And then we die like we've never lived. And it's like, if the one thing for me is that if we talk about death and have that reality that one day I will not have this choice to sit here and have a gorgeous conversation with you, one day it's just not going to be a choice. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And like, I am absolutely obsessed with that day. Like, I think about that day all the time. I think about, on that day, will I be okay with the days that I have had and what I've done with them? So if we have this utter acceptance, again, responsibility for the fact that one day I'm going to die, and whenever that day is, it's really none of my business at the moment. What is my responsibility is to do really, really good with the days that I am given.
Right. Which, I guess, let's clarify a little bit too, because I agree 100%. But it's hard for people to conceptualize the day that they're given, because you have 40 years of experience of waking up tomorrow. You don't really think about it. A lot of people don't think about it because, hey, for 40 straight years, I've woken up the next day. I've always had tomorrow. But you're not necessarily even promised the rest of today. Right? So there's a switch you got to flip at a certain point to realize, hey, life is fragile. And you have to understand that no matter what you do, no matter how great a decision you make, in 100 years at most, someone else will be living in your house. Your car will be in the junkyard. All the things that you think that are important right now will be dust.
Now,
Okay? So it all fades away.
Now, it might be hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, but we get to pick our hard. I think dying and not having lived is going to be way harder. You just
I
get to
agree.
pick your heart in life. That's all. Pick your heart. If you can live with that, if you can stick your head in the sand and go, doesn't matter, I'm going to be here for another 40 years, knock yourself out. Like, lucky you that you haven't had those reminders in life that remind you every single day that you're going to die. Like, full credit to you.
Mm. But it's
I don't
coming.
know that it's coming. It's totally coming.
Like, and I don't mean that to be dark, but for
Right.
real, like at a certain point, the repercussions of your decisions and the choices that you make are going to catch up with you. And it might not be death. It might just be, unhappiness. It might be depression. It might be weight gain. It might be divorce. It might be addiction. It might be whatever it is. Right? I'm not saying, hey, you're going to die from this, but the choices that you're making today, the difficult conversations you're avoiding, could lead you to waking up at 40, 50 years old with regret that your alarm clock's going off and you're overweight and you have to go to work and you hate your life. They all boil down to the simple choices you're making today.
And here's the thing, dying is not the problem. When I talk about that day that I die, dying is not the problem. It is the way that we're living that causes most people most of the problems.
Mm. We don't think about that very much, right?
Dying is not the problem. When you die, it's all good. Like, it's like, fine, we might be paying for those of us that are left behind, but living incapacitated or living a half life, now that is depressing.
Mm. And I think part of the problem too there is we don't get the bill for that until it's too late,
Well,
right?
it depends if you're watching. It depends if you're listening. Sometimes we don't. You're right. You're absolutely right. Sometimes we don't.
So where do you start with the awareness of how important that is, right? Because for me, I didn't get that moment until I had my no half cake moment, right? So I lived whatever it was, 33, 34 years, where I'm going through this process of thinking I am doing the right thing, I'm chasing the right version of success, until I realized I wasn't, right? Until I realized everything I thought success wasn't. And I had the slap in the face to realize I'm in the worst shape of my life. I've got no relationship with my wife. I barely know my kids. I barely know myself. Like, this is not what success is. So then I flipped the switch and said, hey, I'm going to face it head on. We're going to make this commitment. No more half cakes in every area of my life. And we're going to dedicate the energy and the day that I have to making myself better and every person I come in contact with, which is why we're here, right? So
Mm.
if you don't have that moment, can you create the moment? Can you start journaling? Can you start, like, where do you start to really get that intention to change?
I think everyone has those moments. It's just whether you're like your moment you could have just ignored, easily just ignored. You just decided that you weren't going to ignore it.
Hmm.
It was a decision that you made. So I would say that we all have, like I would honestly, my first question to anybody is what problem do you have? And I guarantee if you actually ask yourself what problem do I have or what triggers me, if you start with anybody on what triggers them, that will lead down a path of self-awareness because whatever
Yeah.
is triggered in us is unresolved. So, if we are pretending that eating all of the cake all of the time isn't having an effect and we can't get into the car or we can't do the things that we want to do, then, and I'm not shaming people, but I'm just like, that's the reality. It's like whatever triggers in you, like, if you're, whatever you're either not happy with or, it's just, but it's just that simple. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell anyone what their problem is. I simply ask, what problem do you have? What is it that you're trying to solve?
Right. And that problem could be very unique and is very unique for every person. Right. So for
And,
somebody you meet, it might be to you insignificant, but to them, it's the biggest problem in the world. And that
and
doesn't
I would,
disqualify.
I would say, you know what? I can almost guarantee whatever anyone's problem is that they have is like one of 5 or 10 things. It's not that complicated. We are not special. We might be unique, but we are not that special. When I get people, because I do coaching, so when I get people to tell me what's really important for them and what is their 10,000 day, what do they want to be doing in 10,000 days? What do they want to have done? What financial position do they need to be in to resource it? Pretty much everyone comes up with the same answer. We're
Yeah.
not that complicated. We want to be here. We want to be moving. We want to be well. We want to feel comfortable in our body. We want to have gorgeous relationships with our partners and our children and our friends. We want to be making memories, whether that's, you know, still doing travel or it's doing holidays, whatever, or if it's just a dinner once a week. We just want to be making memories with the people that we love. And for some people, it is, some bigger goals of success and things like that. But essentially, when it comes down to in 10,000 days, which is like 27 years away, those things are always the top of the list.
Hmm. So would
And
you
so
say
then the
it's
quest,
mostly us overcomplicating it for ourselves, saying, but that's not going to happen because of these 17,000 reasons I made up?
or we have then said, oh, but this bit's way more important. So like being worth as much as I can or having 10,000 businesses is more important than having a relationship and looking after my body. I mean, what's the old saying, like you give up your body to make all the money in the world and then you spend all your money to get your body back, because at the end of the day, what's the point if you haven't got a body that's
Right.
functioning? Or at least, the thing of all the things that I have, of all the things that are available to me, the one thing that I would never want to give up is the way that I think about things.
Yeah. And for you specifically, where did that come from? Like, what was your origin story?
I fundamentally believe it came from my dad. My father had, quite a some difficult things had happened, and my mum equally so. My mum and dad both had some interesting, growing up stories. My mum was very much like, just get on with it, but my dad's a little bit more of a thinker, and so just the conversations that started with my dad when I was about 8, no, I'd been about 10 actually. He gave me 2 poems because I was roller skating and competing, and those 2 poems were "It's All in the State of Mind" and "Don't Quit." And I think that not the poems are really good, but it's actually the conversation that started. So Dad and I have been talking for, like 43, 45 years now around how we think and how that affects our life. And I think that the basis of my work is all around that because what I would say is that I think that we have events that happen. And from those events, we tell ourselves a story. And like I'm not saying that we should lie, but I'm just saying, regardless, we tell ourselves a story about that event that may be true or may not be, depending on all the other things that have happened in your life. And, my thing is, I probably alter that story for the very benefit of my future version of myself. because based on our stories, that we then develop our beliefs and our values, and based on those we have these repetitive thoughts, and based on those we have our actions. Now those actions determine the future events in our life, and the circle that we go through around the story that we tell ourselves about these events literally determine the direction of one's life. And if that direction of your life is going in a different place to where you want to be in 10,000 days, then that's the gap that we need to work. Like that is the gap that we start saying, hold on, you're saying long term your health is a priority, yet on a daily basis we're eating Macca's for breakfast every morning. How does that, like that's not aligned. So that's where the self-awareness starts. If that's what I really want, what story am I telling myself? What thoughts am I allowing to go on in my head day in, day out? And therefore, what are the actions that I'm doing on a daily basis that are determining the direction of my life?
Right. Yeah, I like how you say there, what story am I telling myself? Because of how important it is to understand your reality is really what you determine it to be. And I think a lot of people miss that part.
100%. I mean, if I go back to the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life, I can make it sound like I skipped through it, because that's what I choose to believe. I could tell you the really, really grunty things about it that were really hard, but when I tell the story, when I'm keynote speaking, I just skip along, and I tell that story in that way as an illustration of the story that we tell ourselves. It's not that at moments I'm not really reality about it, but reliving that, and the words that I use around that are are not helpful. So, like having a terminal cancer diagnosis and then saying it was the hardest thing in the world, it ruined my life, it was just horrible, every day was awful, is not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. So I choose to remember that the grass was greener then than it ever has been, and how grateful I was. But a lot of this, if we talk in a real essence, comes down to the fact that I was prepared to surrender to that moment. So given where I am, I just let it all go. My expectations of where my life was going to go, I was 38 years old, I wasn't going to make it to 40. I was told I had 12 months to live. There was no chance of living beyond that. And there was also no treatment options. And so instead of being angry with the medical profession, or, like somehow blaming them because they didn't deliver the news to me the way I wanted it delivered, or they didn't do this, or they didn't have a treatment option, or, whatever, I just let it all go. So, wow, I wonder how I can make the next 365 days the very, very best of my life, because that is my responsibility. The situation I found myself in was maybe not my fault, but how I responded to it is 100% my responsibility, and the story that I was telling myself about it.
It really gives people permission to show up as the hero of their own story, which I feel like most people really need to understand that at any given point, you can grab a hold of the pen or the pencil and continue to write out the rest of it, or you can just sit there and let it happen for you.
That's so true. It's like, given that this is where the story, this is where we're at in the story, how am I going to choose to write the next chapter? Am I going to be angry with the world because I didn't get another 40 years? Or am I going to say, in a year's time, when I depart this world, people are just going to go, wow, she was a joy to be around. Because I didn't do that for them. I did that for me. I wanted to be a joy around. Not for anyone else, just for myself. I wanted to, go, oh, I really like hanging out with you, Di. You're fun. It's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, but I so agree with you. Like, I decided to be the heroine of my own life. If you said to me if I could have dinner with anybody in the world, there's only one person I'd have dinner with. And it's my 96-year-old self. Because she is so cool. Like, she's the cooler version of me. Like she is exactly who I am, and she's had more years, and she's not scared to, she's a bit funkier, and she just, like, she's just unapologetically herself. I'm slightly apologetic, about myself every now and then, but she is just like, this is it. this is the very best version of myself. And I always think that the best version of me is yet to come.
Hmm. How important do you think that is on the daily to remind yourself of continuing to grow and to get better? Because I think sometimes even for people like you and I who've done a tremendous amount of work, you still need that drive to continue to improve and know that, hey, you're never going to be a 10 out of 10. You should always be, aiming for the 9.9, because there's always room to grow and continue to get better and improve and to explore and to find new ways to grow. And there's an excitement to that, right?
Yeah, and I think that just comes down to being curious. Like I remember when I was unwell, oh, the first time I was diagnosed with cancer, my dad said to me, we were going to a funeral, and I was like, Dad, this is so exciting. I said, he knows what happens, because he's gone to the other side. Like, he knows all of this. And my dad's like, you're not allowed to come to funerals anymore. And it's like, I'm just super curious because, it's all the question we have. I wonder if that happens. I wonder if this happens, and it's like this curiosity around just life instead of these heavy expectations that just suck the joy out of life. And, the word that I constantly hear with people is, I'm in control. It's like, oh, bless, no, you're not. It's like, I love that you're so delusional that you think you are, but you are. Nobody's in control. Nobody's
Mm.
truly in control. Because,
It is
there's
such an
this,
illusion.
it's such a delusion. It's like, for the love of God, would you just, you're not in control.
Yeah.
Why would you even
Which,
try to be?
yeah, to clarify, you should be in really specific control of the things that you are responsible for, right? You should take ownership of yourself and your actions, but
But I wouldn't
it
use
ends
the word
there.
control because every now and then that's too hard on ourselves. Like,
Yeah,
if I'm in control of whether I pour a jug. Now, if I spill it, I'm not going to go, die. What did you do? You shouldn't have done that. You know? I'm going to relax and just go, it's okay.
right.
I think someone's here. Can you give me 2 minutes?
Sure.
Nope. I'm in my office and it's a Saturday morning, you see. So I was like, and it's,
All right.
really early in the morning.
Yeah, you're in, in the world are you currently?
I'm in New Zealand.
Oh, beautiful. I've never been, and it's on my list of places to go and explore. It feels very adventurous compared to here. I'm in New York.
Yep. I love New York. Love
Mm,
New York. Very, very different though.
yes. Yeah.
I love New York because it's entirely different to where I live.
Yeah.
There's a big sense of freedom when you're at the bottom of the world.
Well, I think that's one of the most beautiful parts that, we talked about earlier is the joy of going to explore new places. I think it helps give you perspective on what's important to you and how important you are in the machine of all of this, right? Because I think for all of us, if we don't get out of our ecosystem a little bit, we tend to think the four walls we surround ourselves in, the zip code we live in, is the all most important thing ever. But when you tend to travel to different places, you realize you meet different cultures, different people who all have their
Yeah.
own things that are most important.
Yeah, and I think the thing is with New Zealanders is that we're such a new country that most of us, it's only our great grandparents that came here. Do you know what I mean? So like we
Right.
are inherent travelers. Like we all jump on planes to leave. It's like it's still in us because it's only, 2 or 3 generations back that came here. Or there's obviously, 5, 6, 7, 8 for some people, but we're only between sort of, do you know what I mean? So a lot
Yeah.
of us that are here are so new and we still have that curiosity and that adventurism and that need to travel. Like per head
Mm.
of population, we must be some of the biggest 20 somethings that leave to go and do we call it our OE.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't actually consider that part, but you're right. I think it's a very important part of all culture to be able to go and travel and see new places and explore. I think it really helps give you perspective on a lot of things.
Well, because even our Indigenous people have not been here that long compared to everywhere else in the world, so it's like it's all so new, if that makes
Mm,
any sense. It's not
yeah.
like yeah.
Are there still growing pains as a culture, considering it's
Yeah,
still new?
yeah. We had this beautiful treaty that has been good at reducing the amount of growing pains, except for the fact that it hasn't always been honoured, and so then we've had remediation to that. Unfortunately, we're probably, just because of world politics, we're going through a time where it's like we almost think we can override that. So we're having some little bit of cultural unrest around some of that sort of thing. On the whole, I think it's not too bad, but our Indigenous people have been incredibly generous for the wrongs that have been done to them.
Mm. It's interesting, when you compare what you share about what's going on there to what I consider what's going on here, and all the different shenanigans, for lack of a better term, that people try and pull on each other.
Mm.
How much of it is really just people who probably agree on the end results, but disagree on the method to get there and who gets credit for it?
Yeah, I think with some of the stuff, it's actually a difference of end result. Um, just specifically, like, to be honest, if you ask a Kiwi, because that's what we call ourselves, if you ask a Kiwi, to understand like US politics, we just, I mean, I just don't even know. There's
Yeah, we
just
don't
there's
understand them either, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, but even some of your fundamental things we just don't understand. We just like scratch our head. We don't understand. We're just like, what? Why does everyone need like big rifles? we don't understand. Like, I could literally go bush about 5 minutes from my house and probably shoot something and take it home and eat it. We just don't think to to do that. It's just like, do you know what I mean? So it's just like, there's so many fundamental things that are just so different. I can't even begin to explain, that we just kind of scratch our head and just go, wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think a lot of it stems from an unwillingness to sit down and have a conversation and reach a logical conclusion, right? Because
Yeah,
there's a lot of people who, again, I think want similar or same things, but we really disagree on fine points. And the problem is we start arguing about the little minute detail because one of us has to be right, one of us has to be wrong,
yeah,
because that's how we control our ego and who gets elected again. And
yeah,
we
and
find
we,
ourselves unable to have real valuable conversation because we get stuck in the mess of it.
I like, honestly, at the moment we're exactly the same, because we have what's called a coalition government. So it's three parties that make up one government, and just everything that comes out of people's mouths is, you did this in the last government, you did that, and it's just not helpful, and it
Right.
feels really, really petty. It feels like we're going through a very petty time as a country at the moment. And even, just to keep one of the parties of the coalition happy, we're putting through a bill that's never going to see the light of day, but of course we have to oppose it because, from a cultural standpoint, it doesn't honour the treaty. And, so all of this, and it's like, oh, it just feels like so much energy going into something that is apparently never ever going to see the light of day. But of course you can't be guaranteed with that, because, like, from opposing sides, I'm just
Right.
sitting back watching it. It's like they have to stand up and say that it's not right, and they have to oppose it, because just in case it does end up going through, because nobody opposed it. So it's like all of this really weird stuff, even though the majority of the party are saying we will not put it through. But it's like,
Mm.
well, then, but we've got to go through this facade. And it's like, oh, it's like, come on, people. And, when there's actually real issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah. And how many of these people do you think have yet to do the work we talked about in the first 30 minutes of this to find out their authentic self, and they've become this is their identity, so now they can't pull back on it? Right? I would tend to imagine it's mostly these people who are just operating as unhealed versions of themselves, now creating a
Yeah.
mess for other people.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know that I'd ever really thought about it like that, but I'm reluctant to say I think you're 100% right. I see it like just when you said it, it's like, oh, I can see so much of that now. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't spoken to a lot of them, but yeah, there's a bit of work that needs to be done in the world.
Yeah. Which is why I think it's important to have these conversations, right? Because
Yeah.
look, you and I are not going to change the course of government in the United States or New Zealand on our own. Wish that we could. But I
Mm.
believe in having conversations, we can spark one person to say, hey, maybe let me look at my life and see, am I making the right decision here? Am I choosing the right hard? Right? Like we
Yeah,
talked about before, no matter what you
yeah,
do, it's going to suck. So pick the
yep,
one that's going to at least align with the version of yourself you want to live in ultimately.
yeah.
Either way is going to suck. Choose which one you want, right? Pick the best end destination you want.
And also sometimes I just think, will it matter? Will it actually matter? Like I think sometimes when I hear arguments about things, does it matter? Some things I think do matter. And then, but I think that we are so evangelistically trying to sit in the extremes rather than talking about all of the things that we do agree on, all the things
Right.
that are just, and dare I say the word common sense, which seems to be a little bit lacking from time to time. God, we
Yeah.
really did get into that political stuff. Trying to,
Yeah. I mean, it's all the same, really. Like I
yeah,
said before, a lot of this is really people who refuse to have that conversation, whether it's how you run your house or how you run your government or how you run your own life individually. Right?
yeah,
If you're not willing to have these conversations because you want to pick a side and say, my side
mm,
is right for whatever it is, right?
yeah,
How you fold the clothes, how you do the laundry, how you put the garbage away, it's all the same as how you run the government. It's just different stories. But ultimately, it's,
yeah.
hey, am I willing to be wrong about this thing because it just happened? Maybe there's a better way. Maybe if I concede on this, such and such will change, but I attach my identity to being right about this rather than providing a solution which benefits the people around me.
Don't you think though that a lot of what we talk about is because people put things into good or bad, like this
Yeah,
is good or bad, but good or bad is only based on our values. So
right.
depending on what values you have, depends on whether you see something as good or bad, right or wrong.
Yes. And I think to even zoom out further, there are so many unique scenarios and conditions which come out to it, right? Which no matter what you want to, which side you end up on, good or bad, on whatever the topic is, there's always going to be this, yeah, but one scenario where this other person has a totally unique circumstance, which has to be considered, right?
Mm.
So you can't end up in good or bad. And that's what we try and do as a culture. We try and say, hey, this is either legal or illegal, but there's so many caveats, and we struggle to say, hey, let's find again a common sense solution that
Yeah.
makes it beneficial for the majority of the people, and we deal with the fringe cases on a case by case basis, so we make sure everyone is served.
Mm.
Right? It's unfortunate we don't have those conversations because it's not a sexy conversation. It's not going to get me elected. It's not going to rally a bunch of people behind me. So we avoid it because we have our own self interest at heart. It's how we end up in a mess.
And, it's that thing where things are very complex and they're quite simple. Like I would say that one of the things that I baffles me is why we can't kind of let people kind of just like especially around religion. It's kind of like some religions are very part of their belief is that they have to go out and talk about it and like spread the word and all that sort of thing. And it's like, so part of the answer is, can we just, if someone's got a different religion, can we just not let them live? But it's almost like they're opposing forces.
Right.
And so I look at that and go, wow. So common sense to me would just say, awesome, you just have a different opinion. Just. But
Yeah.
then, like we're a very new country, and there are many countries in the world that have been arguing for a very, very long time. And I wouldn't, and this is my point, I wouldn't even comprehend the discussion in that, because there's something inherent in the people that have lived it and do understand it and have had generations and generations and generations have gone through that is a deep-seated understanding. So I wouldn't even enter that conversation.
Right. And it becomes deeply personal for whatever reason, that's to them.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the problem we find ourselves in, is people making decisions for other people rather than focusing on how to live ourselves as the best example of ourselves. And I think if we started to just be the best version of me, right now I can enable my family to be the best version of them. And if all of us take, again, the responsibility of leading ourselves to the best version and supporting the people around us, and I'm not trying to change anyone, I'm not trying to force anyone to change, I'm trying to open your eyes to the possibility there may be a better way. You decide to take it, cool. If not, you do you.
I really love, one of my favorite books is The Four Agreements. Have you read it?
I have not.
It's one of my favorite books because it just has four ideas that we could live by. The first one is be impeccable with your word. And what I encourage people is we should do what we say we're going to do, or we should at least watch what we think. And that comes around to the story we tell ourselves. But the other one is don't take anything personally. Like, I just think sometimes if nobody took anything personally, because that's where the triggering comes in. If you're triggered by it, it's because it's unresolved in you and you're taking it
Right.
really personally, and it may have nothing to do with you. And the other one is don't make assumptions, which is just like, that's a good place to start in life. Don't make assumptions and always do your best.
Right.
Just four things that are just really good places to start sometimes, I think.
Yeah, that's hard advice to argue. I would struggle to find a problem with each of those four.
Yeah, and again, we go back to it's complex and it's hard and it's really simple.
Right.
Wellness is not complicated. I'm not saying it's easy to do in this day and age that we live in. However, it's still our responsibility.
Yeah. Well, I think like all these things, they are the summation of a lot of really small decisions.
Yep.
Right. And I guess the encouragement here would be just make one better decision today. That's it. Just start making the next decision as good as possible, right? Not worrying about, hey, how are we going to solve X, Y, and Z? How am I going to lose 100 pounds? I'm going to focus on, hey, the next decision I choose to make, whether it's the food I eat or the exercise I do or don't do, I'm just going to make the right choice in that one decision, take it one at a time.
Yeah.
And I think
what I would say is always start with the food. Don't worry about the exercise to start with, because it's just all about the food.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible how much difference it makes, the choices you make compared to the energy you receive or don't receive based on, hey, what are you putting into your body? And, if you make good choices good choices will come out. Fairly commonsensical.
Everybody is different.
Right.
And even I would say now I'm at a different phase in my life. I eat quite differently than I did 20 years ago when I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I ate quite differently than I do now. And that's just because things have changed. I'm at a different age, stage, and phase. So it's like, being open to that.
Yeah. But you can't make $1 million and sell a course if you advise people to do whatever's best for them. And that's sort of the problem we run into is we want to sell the magic pill or the perfect diet, because then we can say, hey, this is the one true answer. Buy my book and you'll be fine. Right?
Look,
it's really independent.
100%. It's the biggest problem I've had probably with marketing my own business, because people say to me, well, what are you going to teach me? I'm going to say, I'm going to teach you that you've got the answer. And they're like, well, why am I going to pay you to do that? Because you're not listening to yourself now. Generally speaking, I think that the greatest gift you have is to listen to yourself. You know what's important to you when you're quieting down the noise. You know what's important. You know what you need to do. You just pick one of those things and just start. As you say, just start. My dad always taught me, if you want to eat an elephant, you do it one bite at a time.
Yeah, it's true. And it's some of the simplest but best advice.
Yeah.
Right. And you look for what are the things that hold most people back, is they're looking for this super complex answer, right? They're looking for, is there that magic pill which is going to solve all my problems? But unfortunately, the answer is
There's
really
not.
simple, right?
There is, well, there is a silver bullet, not a silver bullet, a silver pill, and there is a magic pill, and that's yourself,
Yeah,
because you can always alter the way you think about things, the story that you are telling yourself.
yeah. No, I truly believe that. And I think if this conversation has really highlighted a point, it's understanding who you are, operating with integrity and from love, and doing the right thing one small decision at a time. Right? I think, if you wanted to boil down a 50-minute conversation into a sentence, that's the way that I would do it. And I think if each of us start to focus on, hey, how do I find the most authentic version of me for yourself? How do you start simplifying the noise and just start making the right decision based on your character, your integrity, doing the right thing, choosing the definition of what you want your future life to look like, and then deciding your hard based on that? This is really not that complicated, right?
Mm.
There's no, again, overly complicated answer to this. We complicate it based on the stories we tell ourselves and the excuses we make up by why we can't achieve this, and the things that trigger us that take us totally off course because we allow them to.
Yeah.
We just got to start making better decisions.
And I think that a lot of the decisions that we make are really, really small ones. They come down to, how much time am I distracted on my phone? Like, how much time am I letting that suck up away from, other things that I need to be doing? What is it that I'm eating? Just one meal at a time, just quietly. What are we doing? And it's like, yep, it is. Sometimes it does take a little bit of work. I know on Sundays for me, I like to prepare for the week, but it's like, that's okay. That's just it. I enjoy doing it, and I get a more productive week, and I feel better by the end of the week. I can do more things because I haven't, eaten too far outside what I need to.
Yeah. Well, I love that. So we're sort of at the end of our show here. I do want to just thank you very specifically for the work that you do, because it does make a tremendous difference. And I want you to know that there are people in this world who are happier and healthier and living a better life because of the intentionality you put into being an example of what's possible. So thank you for being you. And, I just, again, want you to know that it makes a tremendous difference. Please keep doing it.
Jim, right back at you. Absolutely right back at you. Thank you for the work that you do. And I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you. Me as well. If there's any way for us to support you, how would we do that?
Oh, look, I'm on LinkedIn under Di Foster. Normally a cheeky picture of me somewhere. Otherwise, just diefoster.com is my website. And like I'm on Instagram. That's probably where you get the most background version of me. Diefoster.live.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Pleasure.
Thank you.